How could a parent sell out their own son while his child fought for her life in a hospital bed? 3 months after they threw us out, my parents' faces turned white when they saw me walk in, my daughter beside me and a lawyer at my side, holding the documents that would make them answer for everything. How did a man everyone thought was weak and finished deliver the reckoning that no one expected? The fluorescent lights of the pediatric ward had become my second home. For 3 weeks, I'd been splitting my time between Daisy's hospital bed and whatever work I could manage on my laptop from the family waiting room. My 8-year-old daughter looked so small against the white sheets, her face pale but determined as she smiled at me through another round of treatments. "Daddy, when can we go home?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from the medications. "Soon, sweetheart. Soon," I promised, smoothing her dark hair. But even as I said it, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Home wasn't exactly welcoming these days. I'd been living in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house since Daisy's mother left us 2 years ago. Marlene and Russell Carter had offered their spare room with what seemed like genuine concern, but their generosity came with strings I was only beginning to understand. There was always the subtle reminder about rent, the comments about my situation, the way my younger sister Nina was held up as the golden standard I'd never reach. "You know, Ethan," my mother had said just last week, "Nina's doing so well at her new marketing job. Maybe you should ask her for advice about getting your life together." Nina was 28, 7 years younger than me, and had never had to raise a child alone. But in my parents' eyes, she could do no wrong. When she'd lost her apartment lease last month, they'd immediately started talking about how she needed space to focus on her career. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Rent was due yesterday. Don't forget again." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. I'd been at the hospital for 72 hours straight because Daisy had developed complications. The last thing on my mind was their arbitrary payment schedule, especially when I'd already paid more in rent over the past year than most people paid for actual apartments. But I needed them. Without their house, Daisy and I would have nowhere stable to go, and stability was everything when you're dealing with a seriously ill child. The doctors had been clear that her treatment would be long-term, requiring multiple hospital stays and constant monitoring. I couldn't risk homelessness on top of everything else. That evening, after Daisy finally fell asleep, I drove back to the house. It was nearly 10 p.m. and I was exhausted. All I wanted was to collapse in my room and get a few hours of sleep before returning to the hospital in the morning. The front porch light was off, which was unusual. My parents always left it on when they knew I was coming home late. I fumbled with my keys in the darkness, finally getting the door open. The living room was dark except for the glow of the television. I could hear my mother's voice from the kitchen, talking on the phone. "Oh, Nina's settling in wonderfully. She's got such good taste in decorating. The room looks completely different now, so much more sophisticated." I froze. What room was she talking about? "Well, we had to make some changes," Marlene continued, her voice carrying that tone she used when she was particularly pleased with herself. "Sometimes you have to put your foot down, you know? Enable people too long and they never learn to stand on their own." A cold dread settled in my stomach as I climbed the stairs to my room. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step echoing in the silence. When I reached my door, I stopped. There was a different nameplate on it, a decorative wooden sign that read "Nina's Space" in cursive letters. With trembling hands, I turned the doorknob. The door was locked. "Mom?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Mom? Why is my door locked?" Footsteps on the stairs, and then Marlene appeared, her face set in that expression I knew too well, the one that said she'd already decided I was being unreasonable before I'd even spoken. "Oh, Ethan, you're back." She crossed her arms. "We need to talk." "Why can't I get into my room?" "Because it's not your room anymore." Her voice was matter of fact, as if she were discussing the weather. "You were late with the payment again. We had no choice." "Late with the—" "Mom, I've been at the hospital. Daisy had a setback. She couldn't breathe properly. They had to." "There's always an excuse with you, isn't there?" Marlene's eyes were cold. "Nina needs stability. She's building a career, making something of herself. We can't keep putting your problems ahead of her success." "My problems?" The words came out as a whisper. "My daughter is fighting for her life." "And that's very sad, but it doesn't pay the bills, does it?" The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, staring at this woman who had raised me, trying to process what she'd just said. "Where are my things?" Nina needed the space. We had to make some adjustments. "Where are my things?" Marlene sighed as if I were being incredibly tedious. "Some of it's in the garage, the rest— Well, we couldn't keep everything. Nina has her own furniture now, much nicer pieces. We had to make room." The door to what used to be my room opened, and Nina appeared, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Ethan, you're being dramatic. Mom and Dad said you could sleep on the couch tonight, and tomorrow you can figure out other arrangements." She held out a small cardboard box. "Here's some of your stuff." I tried to save what looked important. I took the box with numb hands. Inside were a few photos of Daisy, some old books, and a coffee mug she'd made me for Father's Day last year. The mug had a crack down one side. "You broke it," I said quietly. "It was an accident. I was reorganizing." Nina shrugged. "Sorry." But she wasn't sorry. I could see it in her eyes, the satisfaction, the sense that she'd finally gotten what she deserved, what she'd always believed should have been hers from the beginning. "This is temporary, right?" I asked, looking between my mother and sister. "Until I can catch up on rent?" Marlene and Nina exchanged a look. "Ethan," my mother said slowly, "I think it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. You're 35 years old. This dependency isn't healthy for anyone. I have a sick child. Yes, and maybe if you'd made better choices, you'd be in a position to handle that without relying on your parents." The words hung in the air between us. In the background, I could hear my father's television program, some late-night talk show with canned laughter. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight," I said finally. "But we need to work something out. Daisy needs stability." "Of course," Marlene said, but her tone suggested the conversation was already over. "We'll figure something out." But as I lay on the lumpy couch that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Nina rearrange furniture in what used to be my room, I knew there would be no figuring anything out. They'd made their choice, and I wasn't part of it. My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. "Daisy asking for you. Says she had a bad dream." I grabbed my keys and headed back into the night, leaving behind the house that was no longer home. The next morning, I sat in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, trying to make sense of what had happened. Daisy was stable for the moment, sleeping peacefully with her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. The nurses had assured me she was improving, but the fear never really left. It lived in my chest like a constant weight, making every breath feel deliberate. "Rough night?" I looked up to see Marcia Linton, one of the hospital social workers who'd been helping us navigate the insurance maze. She was a kind woman in her 50s with graying hair and the sort of gentle competence that made you feel like problems could actually be solved. "You could say that." I managed a weak smile. "Family issues." "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling her everything: the eviction, Nina taking my room, my parents' casual dismissal of Daisy's condition. Marcia listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "How long have you been living with your parents?" she asked when I finished. 2 years, since Daisy's mother left." I rubbed my temples. I thought I was doing the right thing, accepting their help. Daisy needed stability, and I couldn't afford a place on my own while dealing with all the medical bills. "And you've been paying rent?" "Every month. Sometimes late because of hospital stays, but I always paid." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my banking app. "Look, here's February, March, April. I've given them almost $20,000 over the past year." Marcia's eyebrows rose. "That's more than most people pay for a mortgage." "I know, but they said it was fair, considering I was also using utilities and food." I trailed off, realizing how it sounded. "Ethan, can I ask you something? What was your relationship with your parents like before you moved in?" I leaned back in the plastic cafeteria chair, thinking. Complicated. I was always the responsible one, the one who fixed things. When Dad hurt his back 5 years ago, I took over his auto shop for 3 months. When Mom needed surgery, I arranged everything, took time off work to drive her to appointments, but Nina was always the star. How so? Everything she did was celebrated. High school graduation, college acceptance, first job, new apartment. When she got promoted last year, they threw her a party and invited half the neighborhood. When I got my project management certification, Mom said, "That's nice, dear," and changed the subject to Nina's new boyfriend. I remembered the pattern now, how it had always been. Nina's achievements were family victories. Mine were expected, unremarkable. Just Ethan doing what Ethan does. When Daisy got sick the first time, 18 months ago, I was terrified. The doctors weren't sure what was wrong, and I was juggling work and hospital visits and trying to keep everything together. I asked my parents for help, just someone to sit with her sometimes so I could handle the insurance calls and work meetings. Did they help? Mom came once. She spent the whole visit talking about how Nina was dating this lawyer and maybe I should ask him for advice about medical bills. She left after an hour because she had a book club meeting. Marcia made a note on her tablet. And your father? Dad said hospitals made him uncomfortable. He sent flowers instead. I laughed bitterly. $15 flowers from the grocery store. Daisy loved them, though. She kept the card. What about Nina? Nina was too busy with work to visit, but she posted on Facebook about how hard it was having a sick niece asking for thoughts and prayers. Got hundreds of likes. The memory stung. I'd been sleeping in hospital chairs and living on vending machine food, while Nina collected sympathy points on social media without ever setting foot in the building. When Daisy's mother left, that's when they offered the room? Yeah. Susan couldn't handle the medical stuff, the uncertainty. She said she needed space to process and just never came back. Filed for divorce 6 months later. I stared into my cold coffee. Mom said it was probably for the best, that Susan was always high maintenance. But then she started making comments about how maybe if I'd been a better husband or made more money or been more attentive. She blamed you for your wife leaving. Everything's always been my fault somehow. When Nina got a DUI in college, it was because I was a bad influence for not visiting home enough to be a positive role model. When Dad's shop lost money during the recession, it was because I should have been helping more, even though I was working 60-hour weeks at my own job. Marcia was quiet for a moment, processing. Ethan, this pattern you're describing, it's not normal family dynamics. It sounds like you've been the family scapegoat for a long time. The what? In dysfunctional family systems, there's often one person who gets blamed for everything that goes wrong, while another person, usually the golden child, can do no wrong. It's a way for the family to avoid dealing with real problems by focusing all the negative attention on one member. I thought about Nina's smug expression last night, the way she'd handed me that broken mug without a trace of genuine remorse. So this was always going to happen? Probably. Your daughter's illness just gave them an excuse to do what they had been wanting to do anyway, prioritize Nina's needs over yours. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. Need you to move your car from the driveway. Nina's having friends over tonight. I showed Marcia the message. She shook her head. Where are you staying tonight? I don't know. Maybe here, in the waiting room. I've done it before. That's not sustainable. Do you have any friends you could call? I thought about it. Most of my friendships had suffered during Daisy's illness and the divorce. People meant well, but chronic crisis has a way of wearing out welcome mats. Except Patrick. Patrick Dorsey, my college roommate. We've stayed in touch, and he's always said if I needed anything, call him, Marcia said firmly. And Ethan? Start documenting everything. Keep records of your rent payments, save those text messages, take photos of your belongings if you can get to them. Something tells me you're going to need evidence of how you've been treated. Evidence for what? I don't know yet, but trust me. In situations like this, the truth has a way of mattering eventually. That afternoon, I called Patrick from Daisy's room while she napped. He answered on the second ring. Ethan, how's our girl doing? Patrick was one of the few people who'd visited Daisy in the hospital, bringing her books and terrible jokes that made her giggle despite everything. He'd never married, worked as a software engineer, and had the kind of steady, loyal personality that made him the friend everyone wished they had. She's improving. But Pat, I need to ask a favor. I explained the situation, expecting him to be shocked. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. I always thought your family was weird, he said finally. Remember when we graduated college? Your parents spent the whole ceremony talking about Nina's high school boyfriend instead of celebrating your degree. You remember that? I remember thinking it was messed up. Look, I've got a 2-bedroom apartment and a pull-out couch. You and Daisy can stay as long as you need. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, Daisy makes better pancakes than I do. That evening, I went back to my parents' house to collect whatever belongings I could find. Nina's car was in the driveway, a new sedan that my parents had helped her buy for her career. My old Honda was parked on the street, where it had been relegated months ago. I found my father in the garage, sorting through boxes. Oh, Ethan, good, you're here. He gestured to a small pile of items. This is what we could save, the rest, well, Nina needed the space. My laptop was there, thankfully, along with some of Daisy's clothes and toys. But missing were family photos, my grandmother's jewelry that I'd been saving for Daisy, books I'd collected over the years, and furniture I'd bought with my own money. Where's Grandma's jewelry box? Nina thought it would look nice on her dresser. It matches her new decor. That's Daisy's inheritance. Nina's family, too, Russell said, not meeting my eyes. Besides, Daisy's too young to appreciate nice things. I stood there holding a garbage bag of my remaining possessions, watching my father avoid my gaze. This man had taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, been proud when I got my first real job. When had I become so disposable to him? Dad, I've paid you almost $20,000 in rent. I've fixed your roof, painted the house, helped with the shop whenever you needed it. Doesn't that count for anything? You're a grown man, Ethan. You should be taking care of your own family instead of relying on us. I was taking care of my family. I was taking care of my sick daughter. And that's admirable, but it's not our responsibility. From inside the house, I could hear laughter. Nina and her friends, probably enjoying wine and takeout in what used to be my room. The sound felt like salt in an open wound. So that's it? 20 years of helping this family, and I get kicked out the moment it's inconvenient? Russell finally looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But then his expression hardened. Life's tough, son. The sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. I loaded my belongings into my car and drove away, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror. 3 generations of my family had lived there, but apparently there was no room for me and my daughter. At Patrick's apartment, Daisy was waiting with a hand-drawn welcome card and a shy smile. She'd been discharged that afternoon with strict instructions for follow-up care, and Patrick had picked her up while I dealt with my parents. I like it here, Daddy, she whispered as I tucked her into the pull-out bed. Patrick has good snacks, and he doesn't make you feel bad for being sick. As I watched her fall asleep, I realized Marcia had been right. I needed to start documenting everything, not just for my own sake, but for Daisy's. She deserved better than a family that saw her illness as an inconvenience and her father as a burden. But more than that, she deserved to see that sometimes, when people treat you badly, there are consequences. Patrick's apartment became our sanctuary over the next 2 weeks. He'd rearranged his home office to give Daisy a proper bedroom, complete with a small desk for her coloring books and a bookshelf that he'd stocked with new stories. Watching her smile as she organized her stuffed animals was the first genuinely happy moment I'd had in months. But the practical realities were harsh. I was burning through my savings, paying for gas to drive back and forth to the hospital, plus Daisy's medications that insurance didn't fully cover. The stress was affecting my work performance, and I could see my boss's patience wearing thin with my irregular schedule. I need to find my own place, I told Patrick over coffee one morning while Daisy was at a follow-up appointment. You're not in the way, man. Stay as long as you need. I appreciate it, but I can't build my life on your couch forever. I pulled up rental listings on my laptop. Look at these prices, though. Everything decent is twice what I was paying my parents, and that's before deposits and utilities. Your parents were definitely overcharging you, Patrick said, looking at my bank statements. This is insane, Ethan. You were paying them enough to rent a nice 2-bedroom apartment. That afternoon, I decided to check on the storage unit where my father had said some of my belongings were kept. I'd been putting it off, afraid of what I'd find, but I needed to know what was salvageable. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a grim collection of metal buildings that looked like they'd been there since the 80s. I found Unit 47 and fumbled with the key my father had given me. The unit was nearly empty. Where there should have been furniture, boxes of books, Daisy's baby clothes that I'd been saving, and years of accumulated belongings, there were maybe a dozen items scattered on the concrete floor. A broken lamp, some old magazines, a box of Christmas decorations with half the ornaments missing. I stood there in the doorway, staring at the vast empty space, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Can I help you? I turned to see a woman in coveralls approaching, probably the facility manager. I'm looking for my stuff. My parents rented this unit, said they'd moved my belongings here. She checked her clipboard. Unit 47? Yeah, there was a big clean-out about 10 days ago. Couple came in with a truck, took most everything, left what you see there. Did they say where they were taking it? Nope. But I heard them talking about making good money at the consignment shop. Nice furniture, they said. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the edge of the storage unit, trying to process what had happened. They hadn't just evicted me, they'd sold my possessions. Furniture I'd bought with my own money, family heirlooms, Daisy's baby photos. You okay, hun? The manager asked. They sold everything. Oh, that's rough. Happens more than you'd think, though. Family disputes get ugly fast. She paused. You might want to check with Second Chance's consignment on Maple Street. That's where most folks around here take their stuff. I drove straight there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The consignment shop was busy, full of families browsing through other people's discarded lives. I found the manager, a cheerful woman who recognized my description immediately. Oh yes, the Carters. Lovely couple, brought in some beautiful pieces last week. Sold most of it already. There was a gorgeous antique dresser that went the same day. That was my grandmother's dresser. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry. Those were my belongings. My parents sold my things without permission. Oh. She looked genuinely distressed. I had no idea. They said they were cleaning out their late son's room. The words hit me like ice water. Their late son. I'm still here, I said quietly. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. If I'd known. Do you have any documentation proving ownership? I thought about it. Most of the furniture had been gifts or inherited pieces. The antique dresser had been in my room since I was a teenager, promised to me by my grandmother before she passed away. But proving legal ownership would be nearly impossible. What did they make from the sale? She checked her computer. About $1,800 after our commission. $1,800 for a lifetime of belongings, including irreplaceable family heirlooms. They'd sold my history for less than a month's rent. That evening, I met Patrick at our usual diner to fill him in. He listened with growing anger, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. This is theft, Ethan. Pure and simple. But how do I prove it? Most of that stuff was old, inherited, or gifts. I don't have receipts from 20 years ago. You don't need receipts. You have bank records showing you paid rent, text messages proving you lived there, hospital records showing why you were absent. Any reasonable person would conclude that those were your belongings. I stirred my coffee absently, thinking. Marcia said I should document everything. I've been keeping track of the texts and payments, but I don't know what good it'll do. More than you probably realize. Patrick leaned forward. Look, I know you don't want to cause drama, but they crossed a line. They didn't just force you out. They took what was yours and told people you were gone. I keep thinking about Daisy. She's been through so much already. I don't want to drag her through a family war. Daisy's 8 years old, but she's not stupid. She knows her grandparents threw you both out while she was sick. What kind of lesson does it teach her if you just let them get away with it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandmother's jewelry box, now sitting on Nina's dresser. My grandmother had specifically told me it was for Daisy when she was old enough. Inside were not just valuable pieces, but items with family history. My great-grandmother's wedding ring, a locket with photos of relatives Daisy would never know about. I also thought about the casual cruelty of telling the consignment shop I was gone. It wasn't just about the money. It was about wiping me out entirely, as if I'd never existed. The next morning, I drove past my parents' house on the way to Daisy's doctor appointment. Nina's new sedan was in the driveway, along with a car I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see people moving around, probably another one of Nina's social gatherings. On impulse, I parked across the street and called Marcia. I need to ask you something. Hypothetically, if someone sold your belongings without permission and told others you were no longer around, would that be legally significant? Ethan, what happened? I told her about the storage unit and the consignment shop. She was quiet for a long moment. That's conversion, the legal term for when someone wrongfully takes and sells property belonging to another person. Combined with the wrongful eviction, you might have grounds for a civil suit. I don't want to sue my parents. I just want them to understand that what they did was wrong. Sometimes legal action is the only language people like that understand. Let me give you a number. There's a lawyer who specializes in tenant rights and family law, Daryl Nguyen. He's helped other families in similar situations. I can't afford a lawyer? Talk to him anyway. Many attorneys will do a free consultation and some work on contingency. You might be surprised. That afternoon, while Daisy napped at Patrick's apartment, I found myself Googling Daryl Nguyen. His website showed a middle-aged Asian man with kind eyes and an impressive list of credentials. The testimonials were from people who'd been taken advantage of by landlords, family members, and employers. One review caught my attention. Mr. Nguyen helped me recover damages when my ex-husband sold our daughter's college fund furniture to spite me. He understood that it wasn't just about money, it was about justice and setting boundaries. I stared at that review for a long time. Setting boundaries. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? My parents had spent years pushing boundaries, and I'd let them because I didn't want conflict. But now they'd gone too far, and someone needed to draw a line. I picked up my phone and dialed the number. Nguyen Law Office. This is Daryl speaking. Hi, Mr. Nguyen. My name is Ethan Carter, and I think I need help. The law office was smaller than I'd expected, tucked between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner in a strip mall downtown. Daryl Nguyen was exactly as he'd appeared in his photos, mid-50s, with graying hair and the sort of calm presence that made you feel like your problems could actually be solved. Tell me everything, he said, settling behind his desk with a legal pad. I walked him through the timeline: Daisy's illness, the increasing hostility from my parents, the eviction, the sale of my belongings. He took notes without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or amounts. How much rent did you pay over the past year? Almost $20,000. For a single room? Plus utilities and food, they said. Did you have a lease agreement? No, it was informal. Family, you know? Daryl nodded grimly. Family arrangements are often the messiest legally, because people assume good faith. Do you have records of the payments? I pulled out my laptop and showed him my banking history. His eyebrows rose as he scrolled through the transactions. This is substantially more than fair market value for a room rental, combined with the fact that you are providing free labor, home repairs, help with your father's business. This looks like exploitation. Is that illegal? It's questionable, especially given the circumstances of your eviction. Tell me about the belongings they sold. I described the furniture, the family heirlooms, the personal items. Daryl's expression grew more serious as I talked. Did you get any of the proceeds from the sale? Nothing, and they told the consignment shop I was gone? That's conversion and possibly deceptive conduct. Claiming you were no longer around is especially serious. It shows clear intent to mislead. He leaned back in his chair. Ethan, you have solid grounds for a civil case: improper removal from the home, unlawful taking of property, and potentially deliberate emotional harm. What would that mean? Financial compensation for your losses, plus potentially punitive damages. But more importantly, it would put them on legal notice that their behavior has consequences. I thought about Daisy, about the stress she'd already endured. Would this drag on for months? My daughter's been through enough. Not necessarily. Many of these cases settle quickly once the defendants realize how serious their legal exposure is, especially if they're concerned about their reputation in the community. That caught my attention. My parents were very concerned about their reputation. My mother was active in her church. My father had his auto shop and local business connections. The idea of their behavior becoming public knowledge would horrify them. What would I need to do? Gather evidence, document everything. I'll need bank records, text messages, hospital records proving your daughter's condition and your presence there. If you have witnesses who can testify to your living situation and the family dynamics, that would be helpful too. Witnesses? Anyone who observed how your family treated you, who knew about your living arrangement, who can verify your story. I thought about Marcia, who'd seen me at the hospital every day. Patrick, who'd witnessed years of my parents' favoritism toward Nina. Even some of my parents' neighbors, who'd watched me do yard work and home repairs over the past 2 years. How much would this cost? I work on contingency for cases like this. You don't pay unless we win or settle. But Ethan, I want you to understand, this will likely destroy your relationship with your parents permanently. I think they already crossed that line when they sold my daughter's inheritance and told people I was gone. Over the next week, I threw myself into evidence gathering with the methodical approach that had made me good at project management. I organized bank statements, printed text message logs, and requested records from the hospital documenting Daisy's treatment timeline. Marcia was more than willing to provide a witness statement. I've seen a lot of family dynamics in this job, she told me as we sat in the hospital cafeteria. What your parents did was cruel and unusual, even by my standards. You'd be willing to testify to that? Absolutely. I have notes in your file documenting our conversations about your housing situation. I also have records showing how often you were here during your daughter's treatment. You barely left her side. Patrick was equally supportive. I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for years. He said, remember your college graduation? Your parents spent the whole ceremony talking about Nina's prom dress. I wanted to say something then. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't my place. But now, they've hurt Daisy too, and that makes it my business. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Daisy. She was getting stronger every day, but she still asked about her grandparents sometimes. Daddy, when are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa again? I don't know, sweetheart. We're having some grown-up problems right now. Is it because I got sick? The question broke my heart. No, baby. None of this is your fault. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and other adults have to help them understand why those choices were wrong. Are you going to help them understand? I looked at her serious little face, so much wiser than her 8 years. Yes, I think I am. Good, she said firmly. They weren't very nice to you. That weekend, I drove past my parents' house again. There was a small gathering in the backyard. I could see Nina holding court with a group of friends, my mother bustling around serving drinks. They looked happy, carefree, as if nothing had happened. I parked across the street and called Daryl. I want to move forward with the suit. Are you sure? They're having a party in the backyard where I used to do all the landscaping, serving drinks with the money they made from selling my grandmother's furniture. My daughter is asking if she made them hate us by getting sick. Yeah, I'm sure. All right. I'll draft the complaint this week. We'll file it next Friday. What happens then? They get served with papers, probably at their home or your father's business. Then they have 30 days to respond. Will it be public? Court filings are public record, yes. If they're concerned about their reputation, that might motivate them to settle quickly. That evening, I sat with Daisy as she worked on a puzzle Patrick had bought her, a picture of a family of elephants. She was getting stronger every day, her color better, her energy returning. The doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. Daddy, do you think we'll have our own house someday? I hope so, baby. With a yard where I can have a garden? Definitely with a garden. She smiled and placed another puzzle piece. I'd like that. And Patrick can come visit, and Marcia from the hospital. What about Grandma and Grandpa? Daisy considered this seriously. Maybe if they say sorry for being mean to you, but they have to really mean it, not just say the words. Out of the mouths of babes. My 8-year-old daughter had more emotional intelligence than my parents had shown in 60-plus years of life. The next morning, I got a text from my mother. Nina's having an engagement party next month. We expect you to come and be supportive. It's time to put this childishness behind us. I stared at the message for a long moment, then screenshotted it for my evidence file. The casual dismissal of everything they'd put us through as childishness was exactly the attitude that had brought us to this point. I texted back, I'll be there. But I wouldn't be coming to apologize or play the role of grateful, forgiven son. I'd be coming with Daryl and a folder full of legal documents. It was time for my parents to learn that actions have consequences. The law office conference room smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. Daryl had spread the documents across the mahogany table like a general planning a campaign, bank statements, text message logs, hospital records, witness statements, and photographs of the nearly empty storage unit. This is solid, he said, reviewing the complaint one final time. Wrongful eviction, conversion of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence is overwhelming. I signed my name at the bottom of the last page, my hand steadier than I'd expected. What are we asking for? Actual damages of approximately $30,000 that covers the fair market value of your belongings, the excess rent you paid, and moving expenses, plus punitive damages of $50,000 given the egregious nature of their conduct. $80,000? The number seemed surreal. They took from you while your daughter was in the hospital, Ethan. They told people you were no longer around to make the theft easier. A jury would likely award more than what we're asking for. Patrick shifted in his chair beside me. He'd insisted on being there for moral support, and his presence was comforting. When do they get served? Monday morning. I'll have the papers delivered to their home and your father's auto shop, just to be sure. And then? Then we wait. They'll probably call you first, angry and demanding to know what this is about. Don't engage. Refer them to me. Daryl handed me his business card. Whatever they say, don't let them manipulate you into dropping this. People like your parents are used to getting their way through emotional manipulation. That afternoon, I took Daisy to the neighborhood park near Patrick's apartment. She was strong enough now for the playground equipment, though I still watched her carefully. She'd gained weight and color over the past month, and her laugh was coming back. Push me higher, Daddy, she called from the swing. I gave her another gentle push, watching her hair fly in the breeze. Not too high. Remember what the doctor said about taking it easy. I know, but I feel strong today. She did look strong, stronger than I'd seen her in months. The treatment was working, her follow-up appointments had been positive, and the crushing fear that had lived in my chest was finally starting to ease. Daddy, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Are you scared about the grown-up meeting on Monday? I tried to explain the legal situation in age-appropriate terms, telling her that sometimes when people do wrong things, other grown-ups have to help fix it. She'd accepted this with the matter-of-fact wisdom that sick children often develop. A little scared, I admitted, but mostly I feel like it's the right thing to do. Because they were mean to us? Because they need to understand that being mean has consequences. And because I want to show you that when people treat you badly, you don't have to just accept it. She nodded solemnly. Like when Tommy at school was pulling my hair, and you taught me to tell the teacher instead of just letting him do it. Exactly like that. And the teacher made Tommy apologize and sit by himself at lunch. Right. Sometimes people need consequences to learn how to behave better. That evening, Nina's engagement party invitation arrived by mail, an elegant card with gold lettering announcing her engagement to Derek Fitzgerald, the lawyer my mother had been bragging about for months. The party was scheduled for the following Saturday at the community center downtown. "You're really going to do it there?" Patrick asked when I showed him the invitation. "It's perfect, actually. Public setting, lots of witnesses, and it's a place where their reputation matters. Mom's invited half the church congregation and all of Dad's business associates." "You know there's no going back after this, right?" I thought about that as I tucked Daisy into bed that night. Was I ready to permanently sever ties with my parents? The people who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, attended my school plays. But then I remembered my mother's casual cruelty. That's very sad, but it doesn't pay the bills. And my father's willingness to sell my belongings while telling people I was gone. Those people were strangers wearing my parents' faces. "I've been thinking," I told Patrick as we sat on his couch afterward, "about what kind of man I want Daisy to see when she looks at her father." "You're a good dad, Ethan. She knows that." "I want her to see someone who stands up for himself, someone who doesn't let people walk all over him just to keep the peace." I stared at the engagement invitation. I've spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and it was never going to happen. Nina will always be the golden child, and I'll always be the scapegoat. "So, you're really doing this?" "I'm really doing this." Friday afternoon, Daryl called with an update. "Papers are ready to be served. My process server will deliver them Monday morning, probably around 9 a.m. to your parents' house. Your father's shop opens at 8, so we'll hit there first." "Any last-minute advice?" "Stay calm, document everything, and remember, you're not the villain here. You're the victim seeking justice." That weekend felt surreal. Daisy and I went about our normal routine, grocery shopping with Patrick, a movie night, Sunday morning pancakes. But underneath the normalcy, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump. Sunday evening, my phone rang, my mother's number. "Ethan, we need to talk." "About what, Mom?" "About this ridiculous situation. You're embarrassing the family with this tantrum." I almost laughed. They didn't even know about the lawsuit yet, and they were already trying to manipulate me into backing down. "What tantrum?" "Don't play dumb. Nina told me you've been driving by the house, probably planning some scene at her engagement party. This jealousy is beneath you." "I'm not jealous of Nina." "Then prove it. Come to the party, be supportive, and let's put this unpleasantness behind us. Family is family, Ethan." "You're right, Mom. Family is family. I'll see you at the party." "Good. And Ethan, wear something nice. There will be important people there." After I hung up, Patrick shook his head. "She has no idea what's coming." None of them do. Monday morning, I dropped Daisy off at her follow-up appointment with Marcia, who'd volunteered to keep her occupied while the legal papers were served. I didn't want my daughter anywhere near the chaos that was about to unfold. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone exploded. First my father. "What the hell is this legal nonsense?" Then my mother. "How dare you sue your own family?" Then Nina. "You're pathetic, Ethan. Absolutely pathetic." I didn't answer any of the calls. Instead, I forwarded them all to Daryl and went to pick up Daisy. "How did the meeting go, Daddy?" "Very well, sweetheart. The grown-ups are going to have their conversation now." "Will it help them understand?" "I think so. Sometimes people need to see things written down officially before they take them seriously." That afternoon, Daryl called with an update. "They've hired an attorney, expensive one too. Derek Fitzgerald, your sister's fiancé." "Is that a problem?" "Not really. If anything, it shows they're taking this seriously. Expensive lawyers usually means they want to settle quickly and quietly." "What's the next step?" "We wait for their response. But Ethan, get ready for them to try everything to make you drop this. Guilt, anger, promises, threats. Don't let them get to you." "I won't." "And the engagement party?" "Still happening. Saturday night, 7 p.m. "I'll be there with the papers. Are you sure you want to do it this way?" I thought about Daisy's question. Will it help them understand? My parents had spent decades believing their actions had no consequences, that they could treat people badly and face no repercussions. "I'm sure." Saturday evening, I stood in front of Patrick's bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie. I'd bought a new suit for the occasion. Not expensive, but well-tailored and professional. I wanted to look like a man who had his life together, not the desperate failure my parents thought I was. "You clean up nice," Patrick said, appearing in the doorway. "Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Daisy hugged me goodbye, staying with Patrick for the evening. Be brave, Daddy. I will, sweetheart. As I drove toward the community center, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to a family gathering hoping for approval or acceptance. I was going to deliver a message. Treat people badly, face the consequences. The parking lot was full of cars I recognized, family friends, church members, my father's business associates. Through the windows, I could see the party in full swing. Nina in a white dress accepting congratulations, my parents beaming with pride. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the scene. Then I picked up my phone and called Daryl. We're on. I'm 2 minutes away. You ready to change your family's world? More than ready. I straightened my shoulders, grabbed the folder of documents from my passenger seat, and walked toward the community center. Behind me, Daryl's car pulled into the parking lot. It was time for the reckoning. The community center was decorated with white and gold streamers, elegant flower arrangements, and twinkling lights that gave the whole space a fairy tale atmosphere. Nina stood near the gift table in a flowing white dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured animatedly to a circle of admirers. My parents flanked her like proud sentinels, my mother in her best church dress and my father in a suit I'd helped him pick out 3 years ago for a cousin's wedding. The room was packed with familiar faces, church members, neighbors, my father's customers, and Nina's extensive social circle. Everyone looked happy, prosperous, and completely unaware that their evening was about to take a dramatic turn. I paused in the doorway, taking it all in. This was their world, the world where they were respected community members, loving parents, and generous hosts, the world where I didn't exist. Ethan! My mother spotted me first, her face lighting up with what looked like genuine relief. You came. I'm so glad you decided to be mature about this. She hurried over, her heels clicking on the polished floor, and for a moment she looked like the mother I remembered from childhood, the one who'd bandaged scraped knees and helped with science projects. Of course I came, I said quietly. Family is family, right? Exactly. She beamed and took my arm, steering me toward the crowd. Come say hello to everyone. Mrs. Patterson from church has been asking about you, and Mr. Hendricks wants to discuss some work for his shop. As we walked deeper into the room, I caught Nina's eye. She was watching me with a mixture of suspicion and triumph, probably wondering if I'd come to grovel and ask for forgiveness. When I smiled and nodded at her, she looked momentarily confused, but then turned back to her admirers. Ethan, my boy. My father appeared at my elbow, clapping me on the back with forced joviality. Good to see you. You look well. I am well, Dad. Very well, actually. Excellent, excellent. And how's our little Daisy? The casual way he said it, our little Daisy, after everything they'd put her through, made my jaw clench. But I kept my voice level. She's thriving, stronger every day. Wonderful news. You know, we should have you both over for dinner soon. Bury the hatchet, move forward as a family. Before I could respond, the community center door opened and Daryl Nguyen walked in, dressed in an impeccable dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked around the room with the calm assessment of a professional who'd done this many times before. I excused myself from my parents and walked over to him. Nice turnout, he observed quietly. Perfect audience for what we're about to do. Last chance to back out, Ethan. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. I looked around the room one more time. Nina was holding court near the cake table, telling some story that had everyone laughing. My mother was chatting with the pastor's wife, probably bragging about her successful daughter. My father was discussing business with a group of local shop owners, playing the role of the proud patriarch. They all looked so comfortable, so secure in their belief that they could treat people badly without consequences. I'm ready. Daryl nodded and opened his briefcase, removing a thick manila folder. Let's do this. We walked back toward my parents, who were now standing with Nina and Derek near the center of the room. The crowd was thick around them, a mix of family and community leaders who'd come to celebrate the golden child's engagement. Mom, Dad, I said, my voice carrying just enough to catch the attention of nearby guests. I have something for you. Marlene turned with a bright smile, probably expecting me to present a gift or make some gesture of reconciliation. Oh, how thoughtful. What is it, dear? I took the folder from Daryl and held it out to her. Legal documents. Her smile faltered slightly. Legal documents? A lawsuit, actually, for wrongful eviction, conversion of property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Conversations around us began to fade as people caught pieces of what I'd said. My mother stared at the folder as if it might bite her. Ethan, What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that while my daughter was fighting for her life in the hospital, you sold my belongings and gave my room to Nina. Then you told the consignment shop I was no longer alive to make the sale easier. The silence was spreading now, rippling outward as more guests turned to listen. Nina's face had gone pale, and Derek was staring at me with the sharp attention of a lawyer recognizing a serious legal situation. You're being ridiculous, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is family business, not something for... For what, Dad? For the courts? For the community to know about? I looked around at the gathering crowd. I think people should know exactly what kind of family you are. Darrell stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I'm Darrell Nguyen, Mr. Ethan Carter's attorney. You're being served with a civil complaint alleging damages in excess of $80,000. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. I heard gasps, whispers, someone's drink glass hitting the floor. 80,000, my mother started. For the belongings you sold without permission, I continued, my voice steady and clear, including my grandmother's jewelry that was meant for Daisy, for the excessive rent you charged while I provided free labor on your house and business, for throwing us out while my daughter was hospitalized. Now wait just a minute, Russell blustered, his face reddening. You were living in our house, eating our food. I was paying you $2,000 a month for a single room, Dad. That's more than most people pay for entire apartments. Derek stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. My voice cut through his diplomatic attempt. This has been private long enough. Everyone here should know what you did. I turned to address the room, which had gone completely silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. While my 8-year-old daughter was in the pediatric intensive care unit, fighting for her life, my parents decided I was behind on rent. They sold my belongings, including family heirlooms meant for my daughter, and gave my room to my sister. When I came home from the hospital, they handed me a broken coffee mug and told me to find somewhere else to live. The crowd was staring now, some with horror, others with the fascination of people witnessing a spectacular accident. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, probably recording or texting updates to people who weren't there. The truly remarkable part, I continued, was telling the consignment shop that I was gone, because apparently that was easier than admitting they'd pushed out their own son and granddaughter during a medical crisis. Ethan, please, my mother whispered, but I wasn't finished. I paid them almost $20,000 in rent over the past year. I fixed their roof, painted their house, helped with Dad's business whenever he needed it, and the moment it was inconvenient to have a sick child in the house, they threw us away like garbage. Nina finally found her voice. You're ruining my engagement party. No, Nina, I'm telling the truth at your engagement party. There's a difference. Darrell held out the legal documents again. Mrs. Carter, you need to accept service of these papers. With trembling hands, Marlene took the folder. Her face had gone completely white, and she looked like she might faint. The lawsuit details everything, Darrell explained in his calm, professional voice. Wrongful eviction, conversion of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We have bank records, hospital documentation, witness statements, and evidence of the sale of Mr. Carter's belongings. This is insane, Russell said, but his bluster was gone. He looked around at the staring faces, probably calculating how quickly this would spread through their social circle. What's insane, I said, is that you thought you could treat your own son and granddaughter this way without consequences. Mrs. Patterson from church stepped forward, her face full of concern. Marlene, is this true? You evicted Ethan while little Daisy was in the hospital? My mother opened and closed her mouth like a fish, unable to form words. It's all documented, Darrell said, addressing the crowd. Hospital records show Mr. Carter barely left his daughter's bedside during her treatment. Bank records show he paid substantial rent every month. Storage facility records show his belongings were removed and sold without his permission. Derek was frantically whispering to Nina, probably explaining the seriousness of their legal situation. Her face had gone from pale to green, and she was clutching his arm like a lifeline. The complaint asks for actual damages plus punitive damages, Darrell continued. Nay, given the extreme nature of the conduct, forcing a man out while his child was hospitalized, selling family heirlooms, and falsely claiming he was no longer around to facilitate the theft, we believe the case is quite strong. How could you do this to a sick child? Mrs. Patterson asked, her voice full of horror. She's not sick anymore, Nina said desperately. She's fine now. No thanks to any of you, I replied. She recovered despite your complete abandonment of her when she needed family most. The crowd was murmuring now, a low buzz of shock and disapproval. I could see the social calculation happening in real time. These people were deciding whether to continue associating with my parents after this revelation. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Darrell said formally, you have 30 days to respond to this complaint. I strongly suggest you consult with an attorney. I am an attorney, Derek said weakly. Then you understand the seriousness of these allegations and the strength of our evidence. My father made one last desperate attempt at control. This is family business. It doesn't concern any of you. It concerns all of us, said Mr. Hendricks, one of Dad's longtime customers. If this is how you treat your own family, how can we trust you in business? The dominoes were falling now. I could see it in their faces, the social isolation beginning, the reputation crumbling, the comfortable world they'd built starting to collapse. Ethan, my mother whispered, tears starting to flow. Please don't do this. I'm not doing this, Mom. You did this when you chose to throw out your son and granddaughter during a medical crisis. I'm just making sure there are consequences. I looked around the room one last time, taking in the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the phones recording everything. Enjoy the rest of your party, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked toward the door, Darrell beside me, leaving behind the wreckage of their perfect evening and their carefully constructed reputation. Behind us, I could hear Nina starting to cry, my mother's voice rising in desperate explanations that no one wanted to hear, and the low murmur of a community learning exactly who my parents really were. As we reached the parking lot, Darrell put a hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? I thought about Daisy, safe at Patrick's apartment, probably reading one of her new books. I thought about the future we were building together, free from people who saw us as burdens. I thought about the lesson I'd just taught my daughter about standing up for yourself when people treat you badly. I feel like justice, I said, and for the first time in my adult life, I walked away from my family without looking back.